Chapter 8, Part 2, The Merry-Go-Round. We soon reached the top of the merry-go-round, lunged upward as it lost its grip on the pole. The wind immediately started to carry us off over the island. We were gaining altitude fast and, of course, still spinning around at great speed. I must admit this was a truly delightful and exciting ride, unlike any other balloon experience I have ever had. I saw now how the boats were kept level. A child in each boat held the ripcord of his boat's balloon. Whenever a boat went a little higher than the others, the ripcord would be pulled, releasing a little hydrogen until the boat was again on the same level. You must only be able to take short trips, I told F1, if you constantly have to release gas to keep the merry-go-round level. That's right, he answered. The length of our trips depends on many things, such as the calmness of the weather, how well we distribute the weight in the boats, and how skillfully we control the ripcords. But, you understand, he added, the balloon merry-go-round wasn't built for travel, but rather for short pleasure trips. Oh, of course, I said. The balloon merry-go-round was heading directly for the mountain. I saw that we were going to fly over it. I asked F1 if this were not dangerous. It isn't dangerous, but it's rather unfortunate because it always means a short trip. Why? I asked. Because the huge crater of the volcanic mountain is full of hot air, which forms sort of a vacuum. When we fly over the crater, the merry-go-round is sucked downward rather violently, and we always use up a lot of gas controlling it and keeping it level. Isn't this hazardous? I asked. No, said F1. By the time we reach the mountain, we will be high enough to clear it by a great distance. The only danger in taking a ride in this is landing on the ground or on the mountain, or worst of all, in the mountain when the wind is calm. Krakatoa is a small island, and if there's any wind at all, it will carry the merry-go-round out to sea. Once, when we first got it, we took a trip on a very calm day. We went straight up, spun around a while, and gradually lost altitude, landing in a forest of palm trees. No one was hurt, but some of the boats were damaged and one of the balloons was torn. Since then, we've only risked trips when there is wind. We were nearing the mountain, and I leaned over the side of my boat to look down at the crater. There was a thick gray smoke crawling around inside. It was like looking into a horrible pit full of elephants. When we were directly over the mountain, there was a sickening atmosphere of hot air permeated with sulphurous gases. The merry-go-round started tossing around violently over the pit, and the children with the ripcords kept a careful watch directly across our giant wheel at opposite boats to keep the merry-go-round as steady and level as possible. Hanging on tightly, I leaned over the side of the boat in order to have a direct look into the volcanic crater itself. In places where the smoke had cleared a bit, I could see a lake of thick molten lava boiling and bubbling in slow motion. It was a sickening, frightening sight. As I was leaning over the merry-go-round, suddenly plunged downward, then swayed from side to side as the children steadied it. I must have taken a deep gasp of breath out of fear, I suppose, and my lungs were suddenly filled with hot, sulphurous fumes. The merry-go-round was still spinning fast, as well as pitching and rocking in the air. I hastily drew my head back into the boat, shut my eyes, and lay down on the bottom of the boat. I could hear the rumbling of the mountain beneath me mixed with the hissing noise of hydrogen being released from the balloons. I think I was close to being sick then, as it is possible for anyone to be. We were soon over the mountain and in fresh, calm air again, and I sat up, feeling considerably better. To tell you the truth, sir, said F1, who apparently could well see that I had nearly lost my British breakfast, I was nearly sick myself that time. The mountain seems unusually violent this morning. I hope this isn't a bad sign. I took this to be a remark of a younger balloonist comforting an older one who had nearly made a fool of himself. I told him that my behavior was quite inexcusable. Flying over water in this spinning airship was completely enjoyable. The magnificent seascape of the Pacific Ocean passed before your eyes half the time, and Krakatoa in its entirety was beneath you for your careful observation, with each turn of the merry-go-round. The island looked beautiful from the air. Its vegetation was so rich, warm, and soft-looking. The mountain looked so fearful and exciting. The magnificent houses of all nations looked like extraordinary dolls' houses on felt lawns, and the Krakatoan crystal house shone like a jewel. The contrast between the trimmed interior and untrimmed ring of jungle around the island was easy to see from our boats. The island looked like a formal garden surrounded by a bushy, untrimmed hedge. After a flight lasting approximately 35 minutes, we were near the surface of the water. The children, controlling their ripcords like experts, lowered the merry-go-rounds gently and smoothly into the ocean. We made one complete turn in the water and came slowly to a stop. "Well," I exclaimed, "that was undoubtedly the most thrilling and unusual trip I have ever had the pleasure of taking." The children in the boats, Mr. F. and I, then all leaned back and relaxed a while in the sun, looking up at the balloons which were now half empty and bobbing back and forth with the wind. Suddenly one of the boys, the same one who had fired the starting gun, stood up and said, "All right, everybody, let's go." At this command, the rest of the children stood up and carefully deflated their balloons and folded them up in their boats without letting any part of them touch water. They folded them lengthwise first, then rolled them from the top toward the bottom where the gas escape was, thus forcing all of the gas out of them and making small, neat bundles. They opened the little lockers in the boats where the sails were, took the sails out, and replaced them with the folded balloons. Each boat had one main sail. "How do you sail these boats when they are all attached together like a wheel?" I asked. "And what do you use for masts?" These were foolish questions, I immediately realized, for while I was asking them I managed to figure out these problems for myself. First of all, the children detached the boats one from the other at their bows and sterns. When this was done, they were still attached to each other by the poles which formed the spokes of a giant wheel. These poles were obviously the masts when the boats were used for sailing. The children, two on each pole, all pushed together toward the center hub until the poles slid out through the brass oarlock rings on their boats. Then, still working, two on each pole, they unscrewed the poles from the brass hub in the center. They all unscrewed their poles except one boy, the boy who gave the commands. He pulled his pole in with the hub still attached to it, unscrewed the hub in his boat, and put it away in a separate locker. Now that they each had their masts, it was a simple problem to put them into the mast holes. Mr. F. and I did our best to work as efficiently as any of the other crew members. Soon, the mainsail was rigged up and we were ready to sail back to the island. Only the need for a boom was absent from this compact invention. We lowered the centerboards and lined up. It was evidently the custom to race home. The boy who gave the signals took out his gun, fired it, and we were homeward bound as fast as the wind would take us. I am afraid I was more of a hindrance than a capable assistance to young F1. We finished the race last by about 7 minutes. The boats were moored to a dock near the freighter in the hidden inlet as we assembled on shore. F1 explained to me that the boy who had given the signals was the captain of the day, some sort of honor each child received in turn. The captain of the day told the rest of us that since this was my first trip in the balloon merry-go-round, the result of the boat race wouldn't count on the official scoring sheet. F1 let out a whooping cheer at this which made me feel quite badly. The captain of the day then took me aside and told me in a most polite way that he thought it would be an excellent idea if I learned a bit about sailing, since I now found myself to be a citizen of Krakatoa. I assured him that I would. The captain of the day then closed the meeting by saying that the merry-go-round would be reassembled around the flying pole right after supper. "And I want you all to be here and help," he said, looking sternly in my direction. After 40 years of school teaching, I found myself being ordered about by a child. I couldn't help but find this heretofore impossible turnabout amusing. I was indeed far away from the usual dull school routines I so disliked. "I'll be here," I said in a loud voice as everybody looked at me and laughed. The whole trip had taken about 5 hours, and we had therefore missed lunch. I devoured an excellent supper at the Bees' Chop House. And then Mr. F and I reported to the flying pole. The captain of the day rang the bell on top of the shack, assembling all of the children, and we were divided into 8 groups of 5. B1 and B2 were still busy. With 5 on each boat, we had the merry-go-round reassembled and ready to go in less than half an hour. I will confess, though, that after this busy second day on the fabulous island, I was well ready for bed and slept like a top. And I hope you guys enjoyed Chapter 8. I cannot wait to finish this story next week.